Obama's speech to school children ruffled a lot of feathers, even though the speech itself was really quite tame. Joining us today is Wayne Allyn Root with his thoughts on the speech and what questions Obama should have been answering about the public school systems.
Thank you, Michael. This is Wayne Allyn Root of Root4America.com. Now that President Obama has addressed public school children all over America, and that caused a lot of controversy, after spending tens of billions of dollars, SAT scores are going down, and that the performance gap between white and Asian and minority students is widening, and that minority student dropout rates in major cities approaches or exceeds 50%. It seems the more we spend on public education, the worse it gets. So when you talk about President Obama addressing every public school student in America, I'm willing to bet that the topics I just described will never be on the agenda when Obama is talking to students, and I think that's wrong. I have no problem with the president or any other government official or politician addressing public schools, but I have a great idea. Let's turn lemons into lemonade. Instead of saying let's not do a conversation like that, let's always have open, honest conversations, and let's allow students to ask the questions that need to be asked. Here's the Q&A with President Obama that I'd suggest for America's public school students. I'd like to hear them ask, President Obama, why did you allow the Democratic Congress to kill school choice in Washington, D.C., even though studies prove that charter schools were dramatically improving the education results of minority students? I'd like to hear the question asked, President Obama, do you care about teachers' unions, who are your big campaign contributors, more than the educational and economic future of minority students? President Obama, why do your daughters, Sasha and Malia, deserve school choice with a private school education costing $40,000 a year each, when other minority students in Washington, D.C. don't get a choice? Mr. President, if public school education is so fantastic and such high quality that you don't believe choice or competition is even necessary, why don't you send your precious daughters to Washington, D.C. public schools? Mr. President, if other parents don't have money for private school or parochial school like you and Michelle do, should their children be condemned to a lifetime of inferior education? Mr. President, did you see the latest SAT scores which show that after a 25-year effort to improve scores, they went down? We have failed miserably again. We spent tens of billions of dollars per year, yet SAT scores are lower. What do you think this means? Why would taxpayers, or why should taxpayers, be forced to spend more on this failing public education system that produces such lousy results? Mr. President, those same SAT test scores showed that despite spending tens of billions of dollars each year to help minority students improve test scores, the SAT performance gap between minority students and white and Asian students has widened again. So will you admit that public school education is a failure? Where have all those dollars gone? And knowing this, why would you and the Democratic Congress choose to kill charter school programs in Washington, D.C. that are actually working?
Well, it doesn't seem fair to me.
But on a scale of 1 to 100, public school kids rate 50, homeschool kids 89 in a national poll. Why do you think that is, Mr. President? With results like this, shouldn't homeschooling be encouraged instead of denigrated and discouraged by our teachers' unions? Are they scared of the competition, Mr. Obama? Mr. President, we spend more money on public school children than any country in the world, yet we get among the worst results in the entire industrialized world. Why do you think that is? Could it be the teachers' unions that are doing the damage? Mr. President, how come California pays the highest teacher salaries in all of America, but their test results are 49th out of 50 states? Is it therefore possible that spending more on education and paying teachers more does not add up to better results? And if that's even possible, why did you just allocate another $125 billion of the stimulus package for public education? If $60 billion per year spent by the Democratic Department of Education has produced failing results, why would you spend another $125 billion of taxpayer money? Mr. President, how come private and parochial school teachers are paid far less than public school teachers without gigantic pensions and free health care for life, but produce far better results? Can you explain that? Mr. President, how come the rankings of America's students have gone consistently and dramatically down since the day the government took over education? Mr. President, how come we don't fire poorly performing teachers? Why should a teacher doing a poor job be guaranteed a job and a pension for life? Mr. President, in the private sector, employees are losing jobs by the millions. As many as 500,000 a month lose their jobs in the private sector. Almost everyone else in the private sector is seeing major cuts in hours and pay. Virtually no employees in the private sector are seeing an increase in pay. So why should government employee union members, like teachers, be protected from firings and receive large pay increases when the money's coming from those same taxpayers that are in the private sector losing their businesses and losing their jobs and taking pay cuts? Mr. President, how come you're so concerned with rising healthcare costs in the private sector, but rising costs for government-run education doesn't seem to bother you? And how can government-run healthcare save money for taxpayers when government-run education keeps rising and at the same time produces inferior results? Isn't it possible that government-run healthcare will cost more and produce worse results, just like the public school system?
But they say they're doing it for our own good.
So therein lies the problem, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to see the president interact with public school children all over America, but only if President Obama or any other president or any other politician or any other cabinet secretary in charge of education is willing to question the role of the teachers' unions in the destruction of public education and the role of government in allowing teachers' unions to do it. Only if President Obama is willing to explain what appears to either be indifference or racism on his part towards the plight of minority students in this country. If that's the case, if he's willing to do that, I say let him address public school students and let him do it for hours. I'd like to hear all these questions answered honestly by the President of the United States. If he's willing to do it, the President should have a discussion with America's public school students. Do I think he's willing to? I'm a betting man. My gut instincts tell me the smart money is on America's liberal-based teachers' unions never allowing the questions to be answered. Never. Anyone want to take my bet? This has been Wayne Allyn Root. My new book is The Conscience of a Libertarian, Empowering the Citizen Revolution with God, Guns, Gambling, and Tax Cuts. And oh, by the way, I'm a homeschool dad of 4 young children.
Thanks, Wayne. For some reason, I kind of doubt those questions will ever be answered by this administration. I'll be right back. It's the Savage Nation.
Savage.